counterparts. Congressman Schiff, I want to get your reaction to some new CNN reporting that federal investigators and computer scientists continue to examine whether there was a computer server connection between the Trump organization and a Russian bank, and that's according to sources close to the investigation. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I can only say this. I'm certainly aware of the public reports going back now some months about an alleged connection between Alpha Bank servers and potentially a server affiliated with the Trump campaign. And I can say, what I think the questions we ought to be asking in the committee are. I can't tell you what answers we may or may not be receiving. But I think we need to ask, are these allegations credible? Have the allegations been investigated by authorities? If so, what have they found? Did they reach a conclusion, or is that investigation still ongoing? What leads remain to be tracked down? So these are the kind of questions I think that our committee ought to be asking. But again, I can't go into anything that we are able to find out until the conclusion of the investigation.
But I mean, can you? I mean, it certainly seems as if there could be a completely benign explanation for this.
I certainly reserve the judgment in terms of whether this is completely benign or whether there's something more here. That is exactly, I think, what we need to determine. And this Alpha Bank issue is just one of many issues that we have been reading about in the open press for some months now. And again, I don't think we want to predetermine where the conclusion will be and what merit any of these allegations have. But if they are credible, then I think it's our responsibility of the committee to determine whether they've been adequately vetted, what we know, and whether there's further investigation that needs to be done.
CNN is also told, and I don't want to be precise about our reporting, that the server issue surfaced again this weekend, mentioned in a Breitbart article that sparked President Trump's series of tweets accusing investigators of tapping his phone, or President Obama of tapping his phone. Does any of that, or if you can say, does any of that align with what you believe the president's motivations were for lashing out at former President Obama?
Anderson, I can only say I have really no idea what caused President Trump to assert that his predecessor was engaged in that kind of criminality. It seems completely divorced from reality, so I have really no idea where this came from, and I think it's pretty clear that that's true of my Republican colleagues as well, and indeed many in the White House. When Sean Spicer doesn't want to talk about it, not even he can spin this kind of specious allegation.
You think that's why the White House is saying, look, we're not going to talk about this anymore, it's going to be investigated by Congress?
Absolutely. I think, they had no way to defend these remarks. They were so incendiary and out of bounds that the best they could do is say, let's give it to the investigative committees and please don't ask us about it anymore. But, as I mentioned before, be careful what you wish for. We're going to have an open hearing now, and this will be one of the topics. We'll be able to ask the director of the FBI very directly if, in fact, he wanted the Justice Department to refute this and they were unwilling. He'll have the opportunity to do it himself.
Yeah, that open hearing is obviously going to be March 20th. CNN is reporting that Director Comey is in the process of meeting with the so-called Gang of Eight, the highest-ranking members of Congress, read in on intelligence matters. I know there's certainly a lot you cannot discuss about that. I do have to ask, what do you want to ask him about President Trump's wiretap accusation?
Well, I can't, at all comment on Gang of Eight meetings. I can say, in terms of what we look for from the director from the FBI, both in committee and as generally as a member of the Gang of Eight. As a general matter, as part of the Gang of Eight, we want to be informed on a periodic basis of the most significant counterintelligence investigations going on in the country. That is by agreement of the Congress and the Bureau. That is the practice, and we want to make sure that that is being adhered to and it's complete. In terms of the committee, there's no way that we can discharge our responsibilities if the FBI isn't willing to cooperate with us and tell us about any counterintelligence investigation that is going on or has gone on that's within the scope of our investigative responsibilities. So that's a point I've underscored with the director, and it's my hope that when he comes back to the committee, we'll have a more fulsome discussion of what, if any, issues the FBI has looked into.
Congressman Schiff, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Anderson.
All right, let's bring in the panel. Trump supporter, American Spectator contributing editor Jeffrey Lord, also CNN political analyst Gloria Borger and Kirsten Powers. Former South Carolina Democratic State legislator Bakari Sellers is here. And from Silicon Valley, Rod Beckstrom, who's former director of the National Cybersecurity Center at the Department of Homeland Security. Rod, let me start with you. I mean, you're the cyber expert. Does this server activity between this Russian bank and the Trump organization, does it seem odd to you in any way? That's the word that was being used by one of CNN's sources.
Yeah. It does seem odd, and specifically, there are a few points here that just don't line up with conventional internet traffic and how the DNS behaves. So let me take on one of those very quickly. For example, the allegation is that these were just requests sent via the DNS from Alpha Bank back to the Trump organization, maybe in response to spam. That argument doesn't hold water for me, Cooper, because if there was spam being sent out by a Trump organization, it would have gone to hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. And Trend Micro has millions of customers. And all of those installations, or many of them, would have been sending queries back to that Trump organization server. So these lookups to see who the organization was, that should have been coming from all over the world. So that doesn't quite line up for me, even though I respect Mandiant as a firm. FireEye is absolutely professional. But this is a question I think needs to be drilled on, which is, why weren't other Trend Micro systems around the world sending that messages at the same time in that time period?
It's confusing for folks like me who are not computer experts and who, in fact, morons when it comes to computers. So just try to dumb it down a little bit just for me. But my understanding is this bank was sending something like 2,800 basically requests for a phone number or lookups to this Trump organization server.
Exactly.
Why would a bank do that? Why would anybody need to send so many?
Sure. A reason would be if a bank employee of Alpha Bank used their corporate email address, like Sergey at alphabank.ru or whatever the address is. If they set up an email account and registered at a Trump hotel program or something else to receive information, if that spam came in, then it would be going to the bank's server. So anyone that uses a company email address to register for hotel programs or anything else could receive spam from different parties. Again, I don't know how this Trump email account's being used, but that would be an example.
But then why would the bank be sort of connected? Because they're not sure who the spam coming is, and so for security they want to check, and so that's why they're, I guess, pinging the Trump server?
Yeah, exactly that's right. So, they're trying to figure out, is this spam or is it a Trojan horse or malware? In other words, like a phishing attempt to get someone to click on something that's really not coming from the Trump organization, but might be coming from a hacker, who sent a fake email, like the fake bank emails and spear phishing attempts. So it's legitimate to do one, but it's not natural to do one 2,800 times. And it's very unnatural that it would only come from one bank in the world when supposedly this is in response to spam that should have gone all over the world. So it just raises questions. And there's three other areas I have questions where the story doesn't quite line up. The information doesn't line up with what we would expect as normal.
Would you expect if computer experts had already been able to find this sort of pinging, would they have been able to find if there was actual email traffic between the bank and some
Potentially. So a lookup is one specific type of what we call DNS query. And by the way, that query, I want to explain.
What is DNS?
DNS is the domain name system. So the way the internet works, we type in a domain name like CNN.com. The domain name system converts that to an internet protocol address, one of these long address of numbers, and that's what's used as like the postage system between the servers on the internet to simplify. But here's what I do want to mention, so people understand how can this DNS information be captured by different parties. That query went from Alpha Bank and it went to the Trump organization server that I think was in Pennsylvania. And a who is request. If it was a who is, it had to go to VeriSign, which is the registry of .com. So all the .com names in the world are held in VeriSign's registry. They respond to that query, by the way. But that query, it hops through the internet. It might have gone to us through servers in Moscow, servers in the Netherlands, servers in New York before it got to Pennsylvania. Anyone in the middle could grab that DNS, could keep a record of that DNS query. And that's presumably where this data has come from. Some parties were keeping logs, what we call record logs of the DNS queries. They saw this traffic, and then they began to work together. But it's just a little bit odd that there's so much traffic from this one bank and not from other places. Among other, the other.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you said there was one other thing.
Yeah, the other thing I want to mention is if this was a real intelligence operation of any sort or any sophisticated hacker, they would never be doing 2,800 lookups. So in terms of a theory that maybe this is about some conspiracy between the Russian government and the Trump political campaign, that's hard to believe too, because any hacker worth their salt wouldn't do a lookup 2,800 times. Once is enough.
Right,
and they cover their tracks on that.
Right, I was going to say, if somebody in that bank is trying to cover their tracks and have a secret channel to someone else, this is not the way to do it.
Exactly right. They'd be using a VPN, a virtual private network, or they'd be trying to hide and obfuscate this activity, which is not the case. So that suggests here that kind of argues against any suggestion that there was malfeasance here. But again, the whole thing's a little bit odd, and so it's an interesting story to tease into.
Yeah, we're going to have to take a quick break. We're going to pick this up with the rest of the panel when we come back. Later, breaking news on the sequel to the travel ban.